Hey, this is Stephen Platinum, your friend in wrestling, with an analysis of the countdown to Full Gear. Now, keep in mind, for the last couple of pay-per-views, they haven't gotten this, meaning a show on TNT with which to promote their pay-per-view. So some people were saying, oh, it's Friday night at 11, whatever. They also put it up on the AEW YouTube channel, but I'm going to take a look at it. This one was different than the other ones. This one had the big pro was consistency. Every story was presented in a very similar fashion. It felt like a very uniform show, but that to me that actually worked as a bit of a disadvantage. I'm talking about the sort of similar premise of how they set it up, where they would have Excalibur and Taz and Jim Ross sort of talk about it, and then they would show some clips sort of telling the story leading up to the match and that kind of thing. This is not a bad format, don't get me wrong, but one of the things that had always been really interesting about how AEW promoted things was you could tell different people were in charge of different segments when they were promoting, because they would have different flavors, sort of different looks, and I thought that lent itself very well. Unfortunately, when you have a similarity in presentation, what it tends to do is make the stories seem like they're the same, even though these stories are very different. Well, let's just get into it. We got the countdown to Full Gear. They say they're going to talk about Eddie and Moxley, talk about FTR and the Bucks. We're going to show Cody and Darby, but that's after they show Cody and Brody in their dog collar match. Little clips of that. And then MJF and Jericho. And then we go to commercial, where we say we're going to... I did like that they did this. Right before the commercial breaks, they said, but when we come back, we're going to talk about blah. And they'd say what they're going to focus on. So they had this stuff with MJF and Jericho. I thought this was a good one to lead off with, because it's one of the things that could possibly sway a voter. Or a voter. Voting if you're voting with your dollars. Yes, MJF and Jericho is one of those things that could sort of get a fence sitter to go over. Where some of the things closer to the end, I think if you're the person who's into those stories, you're already swayed. So I thought that this was very clever and very smart. Everything was good with the presentation. Everything was right. The story of MJF and Jericho makes sense. I want to be in the inner circle. Jericho wants him in the inner circle, but neither one of them can officially announce it. And Jericho with that bombshell, you've never beaten me. So now they're going to have a match to determine if MJF can get in. Makes sense. They show some clips and highlights from their musical number and that kind of thing. Great. Then they remind us that they're going to talk about Nyla and Sheeta, Hardy and Sonny Guevara in the Elite Delete match, Paige and Omega in the finals of the tournament to determine who's going to be the new, who's going to get a title shot at the AEW title, FTR and the Bucks, Moxley and Eddie. But next, we're going to talk about Cody and Darby. So we go to commercial, and we come back. We got Darby and Cody. This was my favorite segment out of all of them. Darby Allin talking about why he paints his face, telling the story of the uncle who got into the drunken car wreck, but where he lived when he was 5 years old. And he paints his face because he's 50% dead inside. No, normally you're strengthened when you're presenting Darby Allin by having him talk less, but this was a case where I thought it worked and it was very effective. And Cody going, basically, it's going to be Darby's time in the future, but, everybody talks about these guys that are going to be leading the company in 10 years from now, and that can be the worst thing to get labeled with. All really great stuff, really complex stuff, layered stuff. How many extra tickets is it going to sell, or pay-per-view buys? I don't know, but I do love how they've kind of fleshed this out and made Darby into a star, and I really like it. I'm looking forward to that match. Then they inform us they're going to talk about FTR and the Bucks, Moxley and Eddie. But up next, they're going to take care of three of them. The women's match, the Elite Delete, and Paige Omega. I think that is smart as well. So we're not going to just have the same length of promos for everybody. Go to commercial, we come back. The stuff with Sheeta and Nyla Rose, there's not a lot to tell, and I think that's okay. I actually agree with Cody Rhodes about that to a large extent, that everything doesn't have to be this sort of personal issues thing, especially in the women's division, which is a little thin right now. Having a rematch between Nyla Rose and Sheeta is good enough for me, and they present it that way. Matt and Sammy Guevara, I thought having Matt Hardy sort of walk us through the Hardy compound and sort of set up the Elite Delete match. I think it's good that they're having a cinematic match to kind of break up the other matches. Smart. And then we've got the stuff about Paige and Omega, which we've seen at length. They've been promoting that on Dynamite and stuff, so they didn't need to go into it to a large extent here. And then they tell us, coming back from the commercial, that they're going to go into FTR and the Bucks. So we go to commercial, we come back, and yes, it's a longer one about FTR, Tully, and the Bucks. Let's be honest about this. I don't think the promotion for this has gone the way anybody envisions or has been as prominent. There's a time where this match probably would have been the main selling point of a pay-per-view. And however many reasons this is the case, it does not appear to be that way on this pay-per-view. But nonetheless, we're going to have this match, and the Bucks have put on the added pressure of, if we can't beat them for the title, then we won't compete for the tag titles again, which is a kind of common trope they go to in AEW. And then they say, next we're going to cover... This one was probably, I thought, the least effective segment of them all, because it was sort of a compilation of stuff that we'd seen. No new information was really added. No new emotion was really laid out there. Next, Moxley and Eddie come back from commercial. And, of course, their stuff is Dynamite, and it's fucking great, and it's a great way to close the show. The video stuff of them is incredibly enthralling. Eddie Kingston has... Even if Eddie Kingston's career was to end after this match, he has put such an exclamation point on a storied career. All the old picture stuff was really great. The old video stuff, the interactions that they've already had on the indie level, just really stellar. I would say that segment, in a different way than Cody and Darby, because those are the two segments that I thought reached the hardest and then were different enough from each other. In a show where a lot of the segments sort of blurred together, those two managed to make themselves distinctive and maybe hopefully sold them a few extra pay-per-view buys. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get this one up there. This has been Stephen Platinum analyzing the countdown to Full Gear. Think about getting it tonight, won't you? I will certainly have my Full Gear report up probably tomorrow. Thank you.